All righty, everyone. So the time has come. We're gonna go ahead and get started here with our, our interview here. So joining us today, we have Mr. Chris Eddy and his wife, Ms. Ann. Thank you so much for being here. So they're going to be giving us, different perspectives on the agency, right? The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. Chris's wife was an FBI agent, and Chris was an intelligence leader in the FBI. And they've also done, a bunch of other great things. But I'm going to go ahead and kind of get started and ask you, can you briefly tell us a little bit about yourself, as far as your high school careers, what things were you involved in, a little bit about your college careers up to where you are now. And if you'd like to start us off.
Okay, sure, I'll start. So I went to high school here in Florida, and I was on the swim team. I was very involved in the swim team really my whole life. And so that's really what occupied so much of my time. But I was also a very dedicated student. I was able to transfer to a private school with a swim scholarship. And then, so I was really committed to keeping my grades up because I had that scholarship. That led me to go to Notre Dame. And I pursued a degree in business. At the time, my dad was in business, and I was one of 6 kids, so I really wanted to make sure, having been number 5, I saw so many of them come home, and they kind of struggled with jobs, and I really wanted to make sure that when I left college, I had a job, and that I could support myself, and that was a real big consideration. So my dad was a CPA, and I saw that was a great career. So I studied accounting, and I got my CPA. I took the test when I graduated, and then worked in Price Waterhouse, which is a public accounting firm in New York City. And really, I had so many job offers with being a CPA. So I was really rewarded with all that hard work. And then I worked as a CPA for about 3 years in New York City. And I really didn't like the job that much, even though I had a lot of responsibility. I didn't find it so interesting. And so I started doing some career counseling actually there. And this is like before the internet. So I would go to the library and pull books off the shelf and look at different careers. And, lo and behold, I saw that with the CPA, you could apply to the FBI. And so I did, and, the rest is history. So I worked there, 27 years. I think I answered the question so far, but that's really how I got started. Just really working hard in high school and then through college with a goal of being, financially independent, and that really gave me so many opportunities. So I feel that was the most important decision I made, was to commit myself to the best grades and, the hard work ethic, and, to reap the rewards. So
I was, of course, a straight A student and recruited by the NBA right out of high school. Actually, I thought I was a good student. I have a high school student now, a son of ours. So I pulled out my report card from high school. I realized I was a middle B student at best, not heavily recruited to go to any college. So I found one, just kind of found my niche, and joined the ROTC program and entered right into the Air Force out of there. And I spent 5 years in active duty, another 26 years in the reserves. Retired about 5 years ago as a brigadier general. Was in government service for the last 20 years in addition to that, and ended up at the FBI here in Miami, where I eventually took over their intelligence program. And we're 56 different field offices in the FBI, and we are the 5th largest out of Miami. So I had odd jobs, throughout the years, mostly in the intelligence community. And since I retired, I got involved locally, and now I'm doing city commission work for our small local government here. And that's about it.
Awesome, awesome. So it kind of looks like you both had a career before you were in the FBI and things like that. Do you find that it is helpful, or do a lot of, people who work in the FBI normally have careers before they're in the FBI, or you see a lot of people going in straight from college? What's your take on that?
Two different paths. For special agents, they really want you to have some type of, it doesn't have to be a career, but living experience of a few years before you apply to the FBI. They think it makes you more well-rounded as a special agent. Is that right?
Yes, and also the minimum age is 23. So, if you get out of school and college, what, about 20 or so?
22-ish.
Oh, okay. Well, you're going to have some kind of work experience, and actually that's the minimum age, but most applicants are coming in, and I used to interview the applicants between 23 and 37, and a lot of them are coming in around, early 30s. Because to be competitive for the job, you really have to have work experience, and you have to have leadership skills, and you have to have organizational skills, and you're going to develop those from, your first and second job. So
the FBI also has a lot of other employees, about 35,000 employees, and about a third of those are special agents. So the rest do everything from intelligence work, there's a few thousand of us out there, to evidence technicians, forensic technicians, accountants, all types of different backgrounds that you don't need prior experience. You could join right out of college into the FBI. So if you wanted to become a special agent and didn't have a previous career, you could come in as an administrative assistant, for example, and work your way up. And people recognize what talent and work ethic you would have on the inside, and you continue your education while in the bureau, obviously, and make you more competitive when those special agent positions become available. And like I said, we hire a lot of intelligence analysts right out of college into the FBI. It helps if you have some background into that, research, analysis, and writing, however.
Okay, so my other question for you, and thank you for that insight, is once you're in the FBI, right? Is it pretty, so you're in intelligence, if you wanted to transfer maybe to be an agent, how difficult would that be? Do a lot of people do that?
Yeah, I don't know why they would want to do that as a step down. I've had a lot of my analysts over the years want to do that route for different reasons. They wanted to get more involved in the law enforcement, but I've also had a couple agents that felt they were better suited to become intelligence analysts. So just different roles, different levels of expertise. Sometimes as an agent, you would go undercover. Sometimes, you're more than likely than not going to testify in court. And just different really skill sets. I think the skills that we all have in common, though, are the dedication and the work ethic, obviously the well-roundedness. My intelligence class that I attended, and I was already in my 40s when I joined, was well represented from all career paths, not just military and law enforcement, which you would typically think, but there was housewives there, house husbands, there were former teachers, just different aspects of life, because if we're investigating crimes around the world, we want a diverse array of people with shared different life experiences. So when the FBI talks about diversity, it's not just diversity of color or race or creed. It's diversity of thought and diversity of life experiences.
Perfect. So Ms. Ann, this question's for you. I wanted to ask you, when you mentioned, accounting was, not the thing you wanted to be in forever. What was it about the FBI really? Because there's other, law enforcement, things like that, right? You got your state and you maybe have your local police force, but what was it about the FBI and really being an agent in that organization that really drew you? Or did you apply to those other ones too and just stick to?
Well, I guess I might say I was unusual, because a lot of people came to Quantico with expectations and a lot of understanding of the job, maybe from family members or whatnot. I did not. And I didn't, again, this is before all these FBI movies and before the internet. So you can imagine we didn't know a lot about the FBI as applicants. And so I have to say I kind of went in blind because I didn't have any friends or family members in the organization or even in law enforcement. Now I know about the differences between, FBI and Postal Inspection Service, because as an FBI agent, I worked with a lot of different government federal agencies, such as Health and Human Services, for the healthcare fraud, Postal Inspection Service for mail theft cases, and a whole array of other investigations, Homeland Security. So, and honestly, they're all really good agencies, Drug Enforcement Administration. But, to answer your question, I didn't know really what I was getting into. And it just, I guess I got lucky in that regard. But there are, in addition to the FBI, there are all the agencies I highly recommend, because I've worked with all of them, and I know Chris has. And they're just the same caliber of people, the same dedication to service. And, we all we're all fighting for the best applicants, actually. The same skill sets of, integrity and.
Well, if you have language skills, depending on what you bring to the table, language skills obviously help. Anne learned Spanish while on the job, which definitely helped her in her career. So we always look for people of different backgrounds to join the FBI. And so do the other agencies. As she says, we're all, it's very competitive, but of the few hundred agent slots open per year, they get 10 to 20,000 applicants. So the most important thing if that's a career goal that you want in service, is to make sure you know the hiring rules. So whether it's drug usage, whether it's occasional experimentation versus habitual usage, make sure you understand that even if in the military, what are the current rules on tattoos. Obviously, any brush with law enforcement, any time you lie on any of those forms, they'll eventually catch up to you. And they've caught people years and years later who lied on their original forms, who were dismissed from the FBI.
There we go. So integrity is a big thing. And yeah, just like you mentioned, there are a lot of great, you have the DEA, Department of Homeland Security, a bunch of things. So definitely do your due diligence, students, and figure out what it is that you would like to do, right? So that way you can make a goal for yourself. So I think it's great that you bring both perspectives, right? An agent and, an intelligence. So I want to, Ms. Anne, if you could go first, explaining kind of what the process, get into detail, what it's like to get into the FBI as an agent.
The application process?
Yes, the application process.
Okay, well, now it's an online process, and it's all handled through headquarters in Washington, D.C. And for the agent position, it is 2 phases, they call it. And one phase is a general knowledge test. So it's sort of like the SAT. So it's just general knowledge, and you need a minimum score to go advance to the next phase. So once you get that, then you have a fitness exam. You have a medical exam to make sure that you're physically fit, and then you have a panel interview. It's a 1-hour interview with a panel of 3 agents, and they ask you questions regarding some of these things we've discussed, such as they want to know about your integrity. Tell us about your integrity. Tell us about how you have demonstrated organizational skills. Tell us how you get along with people. What kind of employee, what kind of friend, neighbor are you? And so it's really your opportunity through your answers to the questions to tell us about you and the skills. And what's so interesting is that we, as the interviewers, do not know anything about you. We literally know your name. And that is all we know. You can be the greatest whatever, and we don't know. So in that way, it's very, it's a fair system, and it's incumbent upon you to, as Chris said, think about how you were living your life now and make choices in terms of how you are conducting yourself, but also create opportunities so that you have experiences to talk about. Take some leadership roles, and it doesn't have to be at work. It can be in your community, in your church, in your neighborhood, in your family, and just have stories to tell about your leadership skills, about how you can organize things. It can be in school, whatever. But now is really the time to develop these skills and keep developing them, because it's not just the FBI, but really every employer will look for these same skills.
Right. So those skills can involve kind of just community service, right? Maybe even a park cleanup. You're getting involved when you're in college, those kinds of things, right?
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing, you don't just want to tell people you did them during the interview process. You want to explain your role and how you overcame whatever challenge it was, right? If you had relationship difficulties with somebody else that you're working with, or you saw a problem, here's the steps that you took to recognize and solve that problem. And because you solved that problem, here was the impact of that problem. And then you kind of tell a story of how you found a problem, went through the steps, and then because of that, you were employee of the month, you decrease waste 20%, whatever it happens to be.
So, Ms. Reddy, I wanted to ask you, was your application process similar to Ms. Ann?
Mine wasn't, but they've since modified it to be very close to the special agents. So you'll take an online logic test, which thankfully I didn't have to take. I don't know if I would have passed that part of it. And then if you pass that, you'll know immediately, and then you're put in the queue for the next phase, which is a writing test. They want to make sure that you're able to string sentences and paragraphs together. Very critical in the intelligence community to be able to write. You can be the best analyst in the world, but if you can't convey your thoughts in a simplistic way to your superiors, you're no use to anyone. Yeah. And then finally, they'll do an interview similar to what the special agents do. There is no fitness test or medical evaluation to become an intelligence analyst or any other non-agent position within the FBI.
Or even an age requirement.
No age requirement. You could be, 18 really, right, and come in, although they do look for college graduates now. And that's just for the intel job. For the other positions, it might just be a resume and an interview.
Okay. And actually, Chris reminded me, in the special agent position in phase 2, there is not just the interview, it's also the writing exercise. And you need a minimum score in the writing exercise. And I cannot tell you how important, if you have time to do, if you're not a good writer, invest the time in becoming a better writer and get a lot of feedback from your loved ones and work on that. Because again, probably any job you have, you will need these skills, but certainly in the FBI, whether it's in intel or a special agent position, so many of my days were at the computer writing up interview reports.
So super important. Yeah, they really are looking for a well-rounded individual, just like you guys mentioned. But it's interesting that you mentioned about the interview process. You think like, oh, FBI, they would probably go do really heavy background check, which they probably do. But, you would think that they would share that with the interviewers, and they, before you walk in the room, they know everything about you, but that's not the case. Awesome. So now we're going to go a little bit more into kind of, what the day consisted of. What did the day consist of? Your typical day being an agent and working in intelligence. Ms. Reddy, you could go first on this one.
Sure. Well, as an analyst, usually we waited 3 or 4 hours before the agent showed up to work, right around lunch. So it really depends on what's going on. So analysts are mostly office bound, but not all the time. They can accompany agents on search warrants, once in a while, a surveillance if it's safe. But generally, you're assigned to a case. So my analysts had anywhere from 5 to 30 cases assigned to them. So whether they're working terrorism, counterintelligence, white collar, gangs, fraud, could be anything. So they would be assigned to certain agents and have 5 to 30 cases. Depending on the prioritization of that agent and of the threat, that would dictate really their work. If they had a case coming to trial soon, they would put all their focus on that and getting all their phone toll analysis, all their charts ready for presentation. So it really varies. A lot of it is research intensive. So if you love to research, consider becoming an agent or an intelligence analyst. we have well over, I think it was 180 databases when I left. And luckily you don't have 180 logons. They have since consolidated that to one big logon to search throughout the intelligence community. That's just the government ones. But of course, if you're great at open source research, everybody puts their whole life out there on Facebook. You can find a lot of bad guys out there posting what they what they plan to do or what they have done already. So a lot of their day is spent researching. And then, like Ann said, you're going to have to summarize what you found, because if you just have it in your head, that doesn't do anybody any good. You need to present that to the trial lawyers eventually to try to get subpoenas and eventually, hopefully, an arrest warrant if that dictates. So I would say it's probably 70% researching, 20% writing, and 10% being able to convey what you found to others.
Okay, awesome. Wow, that sounds very interesting. Thank you. Miss Ann, would you like to walk us through kind of what you did as an agent?
Sure. Our job is can be different every single day. And we also have caseloads. And so, you're typically assigned to a squad, and there's, a single violation, such as, white collar crime, maybe, or drugs, or child predator cases, or terrorism cases, or what have you. So you're in a squad with maybe 10 guys, and you're all working the same types of cases. And your cases can be anywhere from, the first interview, the complaint comes in, and I'm talking, say, criminal cases, because obviously we work counterterrorism and counterintelligence cases, which generally are not ones that go to court. But I worked mostly criminal that went to court. It's more to like traditional law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I'm just interviewing a victim, and and then I figure out, okay, well, maybe if this guy, lost his money, maybe there's other victims. So I just start working a case. I get some subpoenas for records and start putting a case together. So literally any day could be a different phase of my investigation. I might be meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I might be meeting with my federal prosecutor. I might be meeting with other agencies, such as state or local officers, because maybe the guy did some other fraud in their community, and they have, we got 10 victims over here. So I'll go work with some other investigators, law enforcement people. Then I might do a search, there comes a point where I might have enough to do arrest warrant or search warrant. So I've got to go, write an affidavit, go meet with the judge, swear to the affidavit, and get a warrant for a search or an arrest. And then another day might be the arrest or the search, and get a team together to help me to do whatever I'm doing. And then, another day is going through all the stuff. If you got a search warrant, it's going to take days to go through all the records, log them in evidence, go through them. Of course, like Chris said, you've always got to write reports no matter what you're doing. You interview someone, you make an arrest, whatever you're doing, you're writing. There's, training days, because we have to be proficient in our firearms. There's fitness days, we have to be fit. And then there's other trainings to become knowledgeable about changes in the laws. So training for us maybe is like 10%. Field work can be about, half of the rest. And writing and documenting your work is probably another half, because that's, it's got to be done right if you're putting a case together, because someone's life is on the line.
And there's also ancillary duties as well. If you wanted to be on the evidence response team, so if there's a mass event or something and you need somebody to go find, shell casings, or we just had a bunch of people out at the dump, in hazmat gear looking for evidence out there. So you can be evidence response team. You could be obviously on SWAT. There's a lot of a dive team, on the fly team, where you would go investigate in international countries for crimes against U.S. citizens. A lot of different opportunities. So in addition to the 56 field offices we have and our headquarters domestically, we're also in about 40 different legal attaches in different embassies around the world, where special agents and analysts are assigned to give you that global reach.
Wow, it's amazing kind of how everyone works together, right? It's not just agents, what you see in the movies, right? They show up, it says FBI in the back. things like that. Everyone's kind of working together. Intelligence, and which you were, Mr. Reddy, gathers it up. You have to do reports and things like that. Even as an FBI agent, that's something that you have to do, right? All the time, you got to keep going and doing. So definitely, this isn't just both things that you can do. You're not limited, to intelligence, FBI agent, do your research again. So you can,
like you said, it's not like TV, right? So where you can track in real time a wire transfer to Zurich and zoom in on a satellite, get somebody's license plate. A lot of it is you're getting bank records and paper copies, and you need people to input manually that into Excel spreadsheets. So a lot of it is very time consuming, and going out and talking to sources and developing new sources.
Gotcha. So then there can be days where your career can be very taxing, I can assume as well, exhausting, and things like that. Would you agree?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially when you have tragic incidents. We had the Parkland school shooting not too far from here, which was our office was the lead office on that. The Pulse nightclub shooting, we were very involved in the Pulse nightclub shooting, Fort Lauderdale Airport. So anytime you get tragic events where employees might have some personal involvement, that just adds that extra layer of complexity and emotion to it.
Unfortunately, here in our area, we also just lost 2 agents due to they were murdered by someone they were going to do a search warrant at their house. So there are many tragic incidents, whether it's the victims or coworkers, because it is a dangerous job, but that it is part of the job.
Yeah, and that's just something important to know, right? There's always that, risk and things involved with job like this. So thank you all for sharing. My next question for both of you, Miss Anna, if you could go first. What was your absolute favorite part of your job as an agent?
Well, honestly, any agent you ask had a different career. Like, okay, because my career is over, or is having a different career. I personally loved interacting with other agencies. As Chris said, I was assigned overseas, and I worked overseas in different U.S. embassies. And to represent your country and your agencies, whether it's down the street as with the local law enforcement, or if it's overseas to foreign ambassador and embassy staff and foreign law enforcement. I thought that was the most rewarding, because we are, and no matter whether you are an agent or not, intel or some other job role at the FBI, but it's just that you're part of a community of law enforcement worldwide. And actually, one of the missions of Quantico is to train law enforcement around the world. And so for me, I thought that was the most important or most gratifying part of the job, is to work with other agencies, in our shared effort to achieve our goals.
I would say for me, it's obviously working with the great special agents that we have. It was the shared experiences. I mean, I had 30 years in the Air Force too, and it's that camaraderie that you get that I honestly don't know that you get in the private sector. I find it hard to believe that people from IBM are still getting together 20, 30 years later for their reunions, or at Pepsi, where in the FBI it still carries that cachet, and even in the military, right? That if you recognize somebody that's a veteran, or you recognize somebody that was in FBI, that you just kind of have that look that, hey, we did something to help. And it was that great shared experience. I've had this success in my career and some awards I've been fortunate enough to win, but honestly, the biggest kick and the best part of my job was seeing my analyst be successful. I've had 19-year-olds brief 4-star generals before, just putting them in front of there, getting that opportunity. And that same person was eventually able to brief all the way up to the president in the White House. And others of my analysts that got promoted even beyond me throughout their career. Just making sure that they're set on the right path and seeing how it paid off for the good ones.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, camaraderie and things like that. I love it. I love it. So another question that I have for you is you talked a little bit about, kind of what individuals the FBI looks for. Of course, integrity is a big thing, but what other things could you add on to that? What other things, leadership would be another one, could you add that could make applicants kind of stand out?
Well, whether it's your job experience, we look for example, we have a program for languages. So if you speak a critical language, and even Spanish is a critical language, you're more competitive, and you're always looking for, how do I get that edge? So if any of you has any kind of ability with languages, I learned Spanish, getting assigned to San Juan. And just to get a working knowledge you are head and shoulders above the applicants. Some of the other critical languages are probably easy to pick up unless you're native speakers, Mandarin or Arabic. But so a valuable language too, that might be a critical need. I mean, not a language that we don't need, but I mentioned 3 of the languages that we do need. And then to any licenses, we do have a tech squad. So if you have any kind of, handy abilities to do things, and you can get a license, and you can show that, you've pursued some kind of program to demonstrate that you have these abilities, that's very helpful. I mean, I was a CPA, but we need engineers, we need, we need language, we need biology, we need hard scientists. If you think of like the anthrax cases, we need hard people with science degrees to work those kinds of investigations. And that's just beyond the skills. And of course, IT and cyber, right? This is our whole world, as you can see, these cyber hacks are taking down businesses. So if that's your interest or ability, pursue that, and, start getting those certificates of, I know how to do this, I know how to do that, and here's my certificate. Because again, it makes you more competitive. And if you have something that you can say, to prove your knowledge, like a certificate of some sort or license, then that's very valuable. But if you don't have those interests or those skills, you can still be a very competitive candidate through your own doing in those areas that we discussed, by demonstrating your leadership and demonstrating your integrity and your ability to work with others, and to keep your lifestyle clean, so that you don't have any issues, because you will have a polygraph. So
degrees are important, but obviously they're not everything. You see how many college and graduates and master's graduates are coming out of schools every year, right? So what separates you from everyone else? The number one quality I look for, which is very difficult to measure, is curiosity to be an analyst. I don't want somebody just waiting until something pops in their inbox or on their computer screen. I want them to be able to look at a phone number or an address that an agent gives them and go, man, well, why is that address here? What about the neighbors? And I'll give you a real world example. When I was working a heroin case in San Francisco, the agent wanted, give me the top 3 people this person calls. Well, that might not be the most important numbers. For example, the top one was his girlfriend, and the second one was the pizza place, right? So that's not always really what they're looking for. So you get curious. You say, well, how about this? After he makes this call, who does he call next? So if he's calling this drug dealer, maybe he's calling a supplier next, or a distributor next. And you have to have that natural curiosity to try to figure out that puzzle. So it's very hard to test for, and very hard to even get out of people during interviews. But like Ann said, languages help, oral and written skills help, military background, or obviously some sort of law enforcement or professional background helps as well.
Great, thank you so much for answering. I have another question for you guys. So so the FBI has internships and things like that. So as in your careers, did you ever cross paths or work directly with an intern, or do you know someone who was an intern that got into the FBI or things like that?
Sure, all the time. That's the best avenue. The program I teach down here at Florida International University, 70% of their graduates enter into the intelligence community, mostly because they have internships, and that's where somebody can prove themselves. I always wanted interns to work for my intelligence programs. For one, it was free labor, but two is it's somebody that came to the table wanting to learn something, so I can match them with an existing analyst. So that is probably the number one way to get into the Bureau at the entry level.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
and I'm with Chris. It is a great experience. Sometimes, we can bore you to death, and God knows with COVID, I don't know, they might be doing virtual internships, which are not that valuable, but I did use them in my cases, and I saw, like Chris, I was free labor. So I made them do some not so interesting work, but then I tried to reward them with very interesting work. One time I had to go retrieve gold bars that were thrown into a drain on the runway at Miami Airport. One of the ramp workers had stolen gold bars off of a high value cart, and he took them out of the airport, but then one of them had some tarnish on it, and he actually threw it in the drain, and it was valued at about $30,000. So we sent divers down into the drain and on the runway with big planes coming and going next to us, and so I rewarded my two interns, and they still to this day, that was about 10 years ago, talk about it, with seeing how we set up and the divers go down, and how the whole process works with that dive team. So you can have a really wonderful experience. I don't know how they're doing it with COVID, but and the most important thing is, like Chris said, with the curiosity, is to even take some kind of real mundane task and think, how can I add to this solution here? I mean, I might just have to be entering numbers, but let me look at the bigger picture, okay? And bring something to the table. So even the mundane tasks or the photocopying or whatever the tasks are, if you do get one of these internships, just be the absolute best employee and try to use your creativity to bring something additional to the table.
Perfect. Think outside the box. Look for those internships. Take initiative really, and look for those opportunities, students, as well. If this is something that interests you. Thank you so much for talking about that. As for FBI agents, I know your degree was not in criminal justice. Would you say that a lot of agencies who you worked with, their degrees were in criminal justice, or a lot of them weren't?
Yes, there were some. I wouldn't say most. I would say maybe, I don't know, 10 to 20%, maybe 25 at the highest, because we really look for, like Chris said, a diversity of thought, but also of degrees and backgrounds and experiences. And so criminal justice is not a separate application process like attorneys and accountants and language applicants have. So you're just thrown into the regular pool of candidates. So you don't stand out at all. If that is your interest, then by all means get your degree in that. But it doesn't really, for the FBI at least, does not put you any further ahead. I mean, I had zero even understanding of what the FBI did. I can be forgiven a little more easily than people can now because there's a lot more information about it. But, most people came from backgrounds where we didn't have an understanding of criminal justice, and that degree, back then was not very common. So we all came from these different backgrounds, and it was only the former police officers and the military guys who had any training whatsoever. And most of us came from, we came from Wall Street. We came from, like literally I had a couple of teachers. I mean, we came from all different walks of life. So they really start you at square one. And if you have a little bit of understanding of criminal justice, and it's helpful probably, but you're going to learn how to document cases our way. You're going to learn how to evaluate evidence and document your work the way that we are going to do it, all the same way. So you might be starting a little bit from square one anyhow. So it's certainly not a disadvantage if you don't have a criminal justice degree.
I like how you mentioned, different walks of life and things like that. And if you want to stand out, go pursue, something that you can always pursue something that interests you as well. So you can't go wrong. But if you want to challenge yourself a little bit, stand out and seek an engineering degree, don't worry that, hey, I'm not going to be able to get into the FBI because, it doesn't deal.
It goes beyond degrees too. I would review hundreds of resumes just for one open position, and you tend to get glassy-eyed after a while. So the degrees really don't matter. It's those experiences. So I would much rather take somebody that took 2 years and joined the Peace Corps in Africa or wherever, because I know they're adaptable. They can get along most likely well with others, not afraid to take risks. So I'm reading into a lot of that stuff rather than somebody with a business background, right? Where 1,000 other applicants have business backgrounds. So even if it's a 1 year, 2 year thing where you're doing something different, we had somebody started their own business, right? So, well, okay, that took ambition, right? It took drive. So that's what you're looking for to separate from the pack.
Be different. Thank you. So now this question will be for both of you, right? If you could give any final advice, and you guys have given great advice throughout this talk. If you could give any final advice to any person looking to join the FBI in the future, what would you advise them? So high school, college students, things like that. Any final piece of advice? Maybe something you wish you would have known when you were, in college or something.
So I'll start off. I would say first, stay clean. Look over what the applicant requirements are. I mean, that's obvious. You don't want to disqualify yourself, by getting arrested with a DUI or something. And then it's obviously a no-go or something like that. But second is practice what you think the job is. So if you want to be an analyst or an agent, what skills do they have in their job description that you could bring to that interview? Said, I've already done this. I've already researched reports and I've written reports based on that research. And because of that, it was published in my college journal or an international journal or whatever, you take a part-time writing assignment. So if it's investigative stuff, right? What jobs have you taken or what tasks have you done that you could imitate something what Ann has already mentioned? I have skills interacting with people. I know you have to develop new sources. So obviously I don't do that on my side job, but I'm very good at talking to people and here's how I did it. And I was able to document that. So if we can find an applicant that comes to the interview and it looks like they've already done that job, has prior experience, and no matter what walk of life, that makes it much easier.
I would say, well, first of all, it's kind of hard to say only one piece of advice. I think we've talked about many things, but and I will provide my phone number if anyone wants to ask a question or text me a question if you don't want to ask in the open forum. But really conduct your research and seek out, like this is a wonderful opportunity to talk to people who have had the jobs, because there's pros and there's cons, and maybe your question was not asked. So seek out people with the job that you want, research it, ask questions of them, develop some mentors, because we all want to give back. I mean, we were all in your shoes. And Chris and I probably many people on your campus and other people in these, jobs that you desire will help you by providing mentoring and it's your job to initiate it. Okay. So I would say to figure out the jobs that you want, try to develop mentors, and then also conduct research. So, if FBI is the one that you want, what are other jobs that are like the FBI, like we discussed? Other federal law enforcement. And is it the law enforcement side that you want, or the non-law enforcement side? And realize that there are many options, and it's not just the FBI. There's many options. Secret Service, research that, and so what some other similar jobs are, because you want to apply to all of them.
I'll give you a couple examples. When the space shuttle program shut down here in Florida, I had a bunch of applicants that were rocket scientists, really, that wanted to work at FBI in Miami for my intelligence program. They didn't get hired because they weren't the best fit. They're brilliant, sure, but we wanted somebody that had maybe a more writing experience at the analytical level than somebody that worked on the space shuttle. And mentioned getting other experience. There are hundreds, thousands of companies that have intelligence analysts working for them. Most of the Fortune 500 companies have intelligence analysts. Either they have them directly hired, like Disney has about 6 or 7 that work for them to look over threats to their park, obviously through open source research and contacts. But there's a lot of private companies that sell analytical services. So for the oil and gas industry in Texas, there's companies that specialize in what are threats to the oil and gas industry, and we will email these companies an analytical summary every day. Well, guess what? They need people to be able to research and write those up. And there's really hundreds of companies that do that. Maritime, aviation, each one tends to have their own little niche. You could go work for those companies, get that experience. They might pay 30 to 50,000. Sometimes you can work from home. But then you'll be able to come into the interviews going, I've already been doing this type of work for the last year or two. So that again, puts you a step ahead of everybody else.
Definitely, it's that experience and putting yourself out there and being able to bring that to the interview, showing that, you've done a little bit of that at least. Awesome. So those were all the questions that I had for both of you today. I'm going to say at this moment, well, thank you so much. But at this moment, students, if you want to unmute yourselves and ask some questions, you can do so, or drop them in the chat box too as well.